The reason I joined Levi's, I'm a brand guy. I'm a marketing guy. Spent 28 years at Procter Gamble, grew up in brand management and then later, general management. And ultimately, my last assignment there was running men's grooming, which was importantly the Gillette business, which P&G had acquired for $57 billion. So all eyes on that business. When I got the call for Levi's, my first reaction was, wow, here's this amazing, iconic brand, which I grew up in. And I like to say everybody's got a Levi's story. So I could, immediately reflect on some of those Levi's moments in my life. And when I started doing homework on the company, I saw it was like the circle didn't square for me. Here you had this incredible, iconic brand, one of the strongest brands, not just in the apparel industry, but anywhere. And yet a company that had really faltered for more than a decade. The history of Levi's, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s, it was a rocket ship because it was America. It was Americana. It was everything good about America and what America stood for. And so when the kids were knocking down the wall in Berlin, they were all wearing Levi's. And everywhere the company went and planted the Levi's flag, the business took off as we expanded the business globally. Then in the mid-90s, through a perfect storm of a number of things, the business hit a wall. We peaked in 95, 96 at $7.1 billion in sales. So 22 years ago was our peak. We were bigger than Nike then. And we went from $7.1 billion in sales to $4.1 billion in sales in 5 years. And then the company kind of bumped along over the next decade plus. 1 year the sales would be up, but profits would be down. Next year the profits be up, the revenues would be down. And kind of just bounced along with really inconsistent results. So when I got the call, the first thing I thought was, what an amazing brand. And there's a pretty good saying that you only get to leave P&G once, so make it count. And I saw this as an opportunity to make a difference, to leave a legacy. And I talk about this as my noble cause of making this company great again. And by the way, that's my line. He stole it from me. But in some respects, there are a lot of similarity. It is about the consumer. It is about the product at the end of the day and connecting with consumers. So the brand building part of this, which is my strength, all that stuff kind of came naturally. And a big part of our success now is because the brand is resonating. But I had an awful lot to learn. Apparel is a lot different than packaged goods. When I was working on Gillette, we launched Fusion in 2006. The first product upgrade was 5 years later. We're changing half of our line every 6 months. So thousands of SKUs new every 6 months and thousands disappearing every 6 months. I also had to learn retail. We're a big retailer. We have almost 3,000 stores around the world. So there were a number of aspects to this industry and to this role that was new to me, which I ultimately found really, really exciting. There was a lot to learn. But the big challenge was, how do you get this big, huge aircraft carrier? We're a big global company. When I joined the company, we were not quite $4.5 billion in sales. How do we get it turned around and moving in the right direction? And now it's been coming up on 7 years, and our momentum has been strong. We've grown 5 years in a row on a constant currency basis. But the average growth rates in those first 4 years were 2 to 3%. And we were doing it profitably. And so consistent, reliable growth helped create a lot of shareholder value. But then in the second half of last year, we saw an inflection point. Our growth rates accelerated. Fourth quarter of last fiscal year, double-digit growth. And then we just closed first quarter this year with 22% reported growth in the first quarter. So things are working now.
This also comes at a time when consumers, if you look at the government statistics, consumers are spending less on apparel overall. They're spending more on experiences, they're spending more on technology even than they are on clothing. So how do you kind of manage that? And are there kind of any specific steps you think you've taken over the past couple of years that have kind of led to where you are today?
Well, I think we have something going for us that nobody else has got. We're the original. We are the authentic. We are the original blue jean, going back almost 150 years now to the patented, riveted blue jean. And there is definitely a swing back towards authenticity You know, a lot of consumers, especially millennials and Gen Z, they'd rather have fewer items in their closet that are more versatile and that really have lasting value. You see this now in the industry. I mean, H&M has now had several quarters in a row of pretty bad results. I think consumers are starting to wise up to the fact that fast fashion, it is just that. You buy something, it's cheap, you wear it a few times, you throw it out. And a lot of consumers are saying, I'd rather have a really quality piece from Levi's that's going to last me long enough that I might even be able to pass it on to my kids. One of the big momentum areas in our business is vintage. You know, how many brands are there where you're actually paying a premium to what that product cost 25 years ago? And there aren't that many brands that are like that. And that's one of the things that we really have going for us.